opposing evidence. Now, there is an interesting relationship between language learning and cognitive abilities. And we have opposing evidence in relation to two different positions. We have, for instance, numerous examples of people who have cognitive disabilities, and we talked about it before also. But these people perform very well in languages. So they have no problem in learning their first language. However, they might be mentally not up to the mark in relation to the other tasks in their lives. Just opposite to it, we also have evidence of several children who are cognitively normal, who are perfectly all right in dealing with different aspects of their life, yet they have impaired language. And for instance, this example of dyslexia is also an example in this regard. So there might be a child in your classroom who appears perfect in all ways. However, when he or she is writing or whenever they are reading, they make several mistakes and you are not able to somehow correct those mistakes. So this might be due to some sort of language impairment. Similarly, if the research also says that there at least are some sorts of language impairment which are related to your genes. So researchers studied, for instance, a family in UK who for 3 generations, not 30, 3 generations were having children with a specific problem in languages. And they realized that this might be due to the mutation of a certain gene. And then we have these examples of people who suffer from some sort of brain damage. So the scientists found out that the damage to the left hemisphere caused speech impairment. That is, people who were suffering from this Broca's problem or the issue over there or damage to that area in the brain could not speak properly. However, they could comprehend the language that was being used around them. Similarly, if there is another damage, for instance, in the area of Wenrich, for instance, they would realize that these patients could speak language fluently. However, their language made no sense at all because the language was lacking in specific content words. And in their case, although the speech did not seem to be affected to that extent, it was the comprehension that had been affected. So what do we learn from here? We learn that language and cognition do not necessarily stem from each other. They seem to be largely separate, but this does not mean that they do not interact in the brain. Similarly, within language itself, there might be different modules that seem to be responsible for the processing of the language. So it might not be the case that there is a single module or single piece up there in the brain that processes language, but different parts of the brain might be dealing with different aspects of language itself. And this we can say from the examples of Wenrich aphasia that we talked about and the damage to the Broca's area of the brain that we talked about. So this tells us that there is a relationship between language and cognition. However, they are largely separate.